And Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, public transportation has three colors in New Orleans: green streetcars, red streetcars, and now blue bikes. We'll take a look at the emergence of the latter, which have become widespread in the landscape. In Baton Rouge, the legislature has been pedaling into the wind and getting nowhere. Now that a special session has failed, we'll look at what's next. There are new developments in the monuments controversy. We'll take a look. Our Future Watch examines expansion on the main campuses of Children's Hospital and Oxnard, and we'll check on the latest in the Jefferson Parish elections, and we'll look at the evolution of gambling. Riding with us are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Tyler Bridges, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Jessica Williams, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. We go over to Tyler first to talk about
good news.
What didn't happen in the legislature, and also what did happen. What did happen in the legislature? What was that all about?
I think we can focus on more what did not happen, and that was that the governor was trying to raise ultimately $700 million, plug a budget hole of $1 billion. $300 million was already accounted for, and the House said no, and it was both the conservative Republicans who said no, who have been traditionally been saying no to the governor, but on also one key vote, several members of the Black Caucus said no on a bill, and so nothing made it out of it. Now, if you're an anti-tax conservative, you think that's a good thing, but probably most people think it was not good what happened.
I would say going into this special session, I mean, the governor, called a session, and he said that he had assurances from Speaker Barra to raise at least part of the money that was needed of this projected shortfall. But after the session, he said, no, the Speaker did not deliver and went back on his word. Who's telling the truth here?
Yeah, and that's not a new story. I wrote a story, in fact, a year ago where the governor thought he had a deal with the Speaker of the House, and it did not materialize. What happened this time, same thing, according to the governor, but was very striking in the press conference that the governor had after the special sessions. He called out the Speaker in very harsh language. In fact, I asked the governor, why are you doing this now? And he just said his frustration level was so great that he was really willing to call out a guy who has to be his negotiating partner. You normally don't want to do that with someone you're going to have to negotiate again, but he was saying that I had a deal, we were supposed to move forward, we were going to raise the money, he didn't keep his end, and that's why the special session crashed and burned. Now, conservatives could say, well, he just needs someone to blame, so he's fixing his blame on the Speaker.
So then the flip side is, those are saying, well, we shouldn't have had the special session in the first place. I mean, why was it even called? And the governor showed no leadership.
Yeah, and that's the view by State Representative Cameron Henry from Metairie, who is perhaps the leader of the anti-tax no caucus in the State House. The governor, I think his answer is, I thought I had a deal with the Speaker. We sat down and worked everything out along with the Senate President. We were all going to move forward, and then they reneged.
But there's also the theory that the real objective is to undermine the governor. Here you have a Republican legislature, you have a Democratic governor, and they don't want the governor to look good or successful.
And it's interesting, Democrats will say that, and the governor said that in the final press conference on Monday night, but we have also had some House Republicans say that is the attitude among some of their colleagues.
So during the special session, the effort was certainly to raise the money to close this gap, and so we won't fall off this so-called fiscal cliff by keeping a quarter of the sales tax that had been imposed in 2016, and making some exemptions permanent, and then also to change some income tax structure. Just what happened? What was the opposition to this on both sides?
Well, there's a significant number of Republicans in the House, and all revenue bills start in the House, who are simply going to vote against any tax. And the governor has tried to say, well, if we don't come up with this revenue, which was $1 billion of the $1.3 billion of expiring taxes, then TOPS is going to be cut. Money for the sheriffs to house prisoners is going to be cut. Health care for the poor is going to be cut. Universities are not going to get the money. All across the board, people are not going to get the money they need. And so he was making that pitch. And ultimately, the situation on the final night or the Sunday night was that the Democrats are saying, you got to take our bill first, Mr. Speaker. And the Speaker saying, no, I'm going to go with the Republican bill first. And if each side was going to kill the other if their bill did not go first, which kind of reminds you of some stuff that might happen in a play yard.
Okay, so now we are on the brink of the regular session, which begins Monday.
Well,
How
here's
can
what-
we expect cooperation between the two sides and working toward compromise when we just witnessed what happened?
Well, what we're not going to see is during the regular session is any effort to raise taxes because that's not allowed. But they do have to balance the budget. The budget takes effect on July 1st. Again, that's when all those $1.3 billion of taxes are expiring, principally the 1-cent sales tax. So now the question is, all right, will the Republicans who control the House, will they actually come up with a budget that cuts $1 billion or $700 million in revenue? And the governor has said, all right, you don't want to spend money? Okay, show me a budget, show me the cuts, and that's going to be really interesting.
Has revenue really not increased at all in that time? That was supposed to be a temporary tax, the 1-cent sales tax, while we were in a revenue low. Has the state not come up with any new revenue in that amount of time?
Well, again, the amount of taxes that are expiring is $1.3 billion, and the governor was seeking to come up with $1 billion. So that might be the difference right there. But remember, last year there was supposed to be tax reform. That was why the original the temporary taxes were passed. So the next year in 2017, the legislature would pass tax reform that would create a better tax system and also raise the necessary revenue, but the legislature, again, led by the House, conservatives did not want to do that.
And there was some questions about what is really the shortfall. What is that exact number?
Yeah, and the governor has faced questions on that. You're right.
Okay, well, here we go again on Monday. I'm sure you'll be telling us about it in weeks to come. Thanks a lot, Tyler. All righty, over to Errol right now. Jefferson Parish politics, it is heating up.
Yeah, in the sheriff's race, actually, both the two contestants, Joe Lopinto and John Fortunato, each got good news today. Joe Lopinto got the endorsement of the Times-Picayune, fairly strong endorsement. John Fortunato, a poll was released, done by UNL for WDSU Channel 6, showing him with a 16-point lead. That was one of these robocall type polls, and so those are the least credible, but the people at UNL also know how to do polls, and so they're a credible polling organization. And Fortunato seems to have seems to be especially strong in the West Bank. The other thing that happened in his campaign, well, first of all, it started off badly because there was a little flare-up about it having been taken off duty overseeing after-time work.
Details, yeah.
But that really didn't amount to too much. But Fortunato came out with a campaign. He played the Harry Lee card this week, which was a commercial, to me a very strong commercial, with a very outspoken John Fortunato saying, I'm gonna run this like Harry Lee used to do it, and there's photos of him with Harry Lee. And in the background is Newell Norman, by the way. But I thought it was a very effective, and they wouldn't have done that without polling showing Harry Lee's memory is still very powerful in Jefferson Parish.
And what's interesting is that Harry Lee's daughter, Cynthia, who is on the parish council, she has endorsed not John Fortunato, but Joe Lopinto. And I actually to look at a little bit at that poll that you were talking about, Errol. I think that poll was not a very accurate poll. John Fortunato got good news out of that poll. It's going to help him raise more money because people think he's got a good chance. But I really don't believe that Fortunato has anywhere near a 16-point lead.
And of course, Lopinto was put into office by Newell Norman, who was Harry Lee's chosen successor. And so the lineage from Harry Lee goes directly to Lopinto, even though the connection, I mean, Fortunato can claim a link also, having been the public relations person for him a long time.
So 2 weeks left to the election. Lopinto is the one with the really deep war chest, right?
He has the most money, at this point. So
yeah, he's got Lopinto has the endorsements. He has a lot more money. And so I think viewers are going to be seeing a lot of Joe Lopinto ads on TV, and people who live in Jefferson Parish are going to be seeing even more mail pieces this week that Lopinto, I know, sent out one where showing him endorsed by Steve Scalise, the congressman.
Okay. Did you want to touch on Kenner?
Yeah, we just want to mention that in Kenner, it's, the regular city elections are scheduled for the March 24th election, which includes an election for mayor. And you're saying, did they just elect a mayor in Kenner? They did in December of 2016, but that was the interim election to replace Mike Ianney, and so Ben Zahn won that. And so, having been elected in the interim election, this is a regularly scheduled election for the 4-year term that's coming up. And usually when someone wins an interim election, when they have all the momentum when you get to the regular election, which is shortly after. So there are 3 candidates in the race. I think it's fair to say that Ben Zahn is going to be the heavy favorite in this. But one of the candidates is Donna Raynaud, who's a Republican, who's the wife of a council member who is resigning, not running for again. And he says the reason he's not running for again is because they just don't get along with Ben Zahn. And apparently Donna Raynaud's been to the council meetings and they've been critical of each other, and Albert Morello, who's a construction worker. So I don't think it's a very strong field against him, so it's likely that Ben Zahn's going to win. But what's interesting about the Kenner mayor's office is that Kenner is a major population center in Jefferson Parish. In modern times, 3 Kenner mayors have become parish president, beginning with Joe Ianney, who was beloved in Kenner, Aaron Broussard, and then the current Mike Ianney. And so it is a real stepping stone for other offices in Jefferson Parish.
Again, in 2 weeks, right? That
Right.
election. All right,
And
thanks
early
a lot.
voting is going to take place beginning this weekend.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that out, Tyler. Okay, Jessica, blue bikes. You been riding one?
I have written one actually, and I've seen a bunch of other folks on them in the city. This was launched in December as part of the mayor and the city council's commitment to making what they call more complete streets. So providing new avenues for people to get to work, to get to school, and to exercise. They made a big push early on to state that this is not just for tourists, this is for residents. We want people, New Orleanians, to use this service. And they actually set it up with the help of a private partner, Blue Cross Blue Shield. There's no city money that's going into this. The major sponsors are paying for it totally. And for $8 an hour, you can ride a bike to work, pick it up at one location, drop it off somewhere else.
You can also pay a monthly fee, can't you? Is that for unlimited rides?
Well, it's an hour a day, and then
Okay.
$15 a month for an hour a day, and then after that initial hour, you charge at the regular $8 rate after that.
Now, the way you
But
use this is you establish an app, right?
You
and,
do.
and then you do all the technical work through the app.
You do. You set up your credit card account through the app so that they can charge you for when you use the bike. And then when you go and you say, okay, show me where the nearest bikes are to me, you put that into your phone. It tells you, they give you a code, and you walk over to the bike, punch in your code, pick it up, and go. You can also take it and lock it so that if you're not using it for the whole hour, it doesn't charge you for the time that you're not using it. And while you're locked, it'll essentially be on hold until you use it again and use your full hour.
So you could ride it to work, work your shift, ride it home from work.
And it would still be an
conceivably, and
hour.
it's still your,
And
within
leave
your
it where
hour.
you parked it.
Yep.
Okay, what parts of the city will we find these blue bikes?
In very centrally located areas. So Central Business District, there's some in Mid-City, there's some in Treme, Bywater, not yet in Gentilly, not yet in New Orleans East or in Lakeview, but the city is hopeful that depending on the initial success, they'll be able to expand to more areas such as that.
I think this can really be major. It's more than just riding bikes. I think it's going to change the way people think about neighborhoods and getting around and their attitudes. It seems like I know cities around the country are starting to do it. Another advantage they show up that they say is it'll give more incentive for shopping locally. Because if you're on a bike, you're not going to run out, to
Never
lakes.
tried to park on Magazine Street?
Right? Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, you can take a bike and you can ride down there, you can park it, you can get your groceries done. There's a little basket in the front of it where you can put some small items.
Does
and
it come with a locking device?
It does. It comes with a locking device. The folks that I actually talk to who use it, there's one guy who is the executive chef over at Carmel on Julia Street, and he takes it, rides down to Rouse's, gets his groceries, comes right back, and it's quick, it's easy. He doesn't have to fight through traffic to get there.
So if there is no blue bike stand to, around where you're going, the point where you're going, but there is another city bike stand or even a telephone pole or something, can you just put it there? Can you park
You
it there?
you can. Now, depending on where in the city you are and how close you are to a Blue Bike stand, they may charge you a little fee if you park it outside of the official Blue Bike stand. But the city bike stands, my understanding, the green ones, you can put it there and it's not an extra fee associated with it.
And so if you ride it like to Lakeview, which is not in the zone, you have to bring it back. Otherwise, you might get charged a retrieval fee as well, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so they do hope to expand this whole thing.
They do, and they're actually looking at, there's 700 bikes at 70 stations right now, and over the next 4 years, they're actually looking at expanding that to 900 bikes at 90 stations, and any expansion beyond that would really be based on the success of the 4-year period.
Is this beautiful spring weather sort of showing a pickup of people picking up the bikes?
They did. They actually mentioned to me that over the last, not this weekend, but the last weekend, they saw 702 new signups, which was the most they had ever seen, including Mardi Gras, since the program got started in December.
Does it
Which
ride
Which isn't
well?
surprising given the cold snaps that
Right,
we've had,
right.
you know, leading up to now.
It'll be fun to track it during Jazz Fest.
Yes.
Yeah. E, did you have another comment?
Does it ride well? Is it comfortable to
It's
ride?
pretty comfortable. I rode it actually around the city park area on the trail, and it was, you know, you pick it up, you ride it a couple times, and before you know it, your hour's up, and you've gotten some exercise for the day. And there were a bunch of other people riding it as well. Wasn't just, you know, a reporter trying to test it out.
Okay, thanks.
Did
a
the
lot.
Before she wrote the story.
Thanks, Jessica. Over to Dawn right now in the Future Watch, and there's some hospital expansion going on.
It seems like we've talked a lot about the Canal Street, Tulane Avenue corridor and the new hospitals there, but if you drive along River Road or along Chapatula Street and look at Children's Hospital main campus or Ochsner main campus, there are new buildings, kind of just aplenty. All you have to do is look and say, oh, what was that? That wasn't there before. That wasn't there before. Between those two hospitals, there's nearly $700 million in expansion and upgrades happening. We'll start with Children's, which for years and years was really landlocked between the railroad tracks on one side, Audubon Park on the other side, the neighborhood on the other side, and New Orleans Adolescent Hospital, which used to be the Soldiers Hospital, on the other side. Well, they acquired that New Orleans Adolescent Hospital property in 2014, and that's allowed for a major expansion. The biggest thing you see there now on that side of their campus is a new 400-car parking garage that's going to open later this spring. 2 weeks ago, they added a pedestrian walkway bridge on the second floor from that parking garage into the main hospital, which will really make it much easier for patients and visitors who are arriving for those patients to get in and out of the hospital. They're also going to expand to create a brand new lobby and registration area that's centrally located and easier to identify. The hospital's a bit tricky now. Among the other expansions, right now they're the only pediatric cardiac ICU in the region. That will expand. Their 20-bed unit will be expanded with all private rooms and a special area for neonatal patients who come in from hospitals around the area for heart surgery. Their cancer center also expanding. We've talked before on this program about the Hogs House, which is the family area where people can come and stay if they have a loved one receiving long-term care. That's been paid for by Hogs for the Cause. There are 2 family housing units going up. There will be 28 suites, suite-like staying for families, laundry facilities, a kitchen for cooking. All of the improvements at Children's will happen between now and 2020. Their new CEO says, who inherited this project when he came in, he calls it kind of remodeling a plane while it's still in flight. It is very exciting, but it's all happening while the hospital is seeing patients still.
Let's move on to Ochsner
Switch to
now.
Ochsner so we don't spend too much time on one. On their main campus, they're adding 7 floors to their existing 8-floor structure. 3 of those floors will be immediately operational once they are finished. The other 3 will be for future growth. Those are inpatient beds. Across the street from their main campus, they've added a brand new imaging center for more MRIs and mammograms and those sorts of things. The cancer center, the Tom and Gail Benson Cancer Center on their property, is doubling in size. They'll increase personalized and specialized semi-private patient oncology and chemo stations, dedicated space for bone marrow transplants. Overall, their increases will allow for more specialty services, for cancer care, for organ transplants, neurologic and pediatric care. They've also acquired the old Jefferson Plaza Shopping Center. That's where a whole rehabilitation hospital will be with beds dedicated to brain injury patients and regular inpatient beds, and an extended care hospital for the most critically ill patients going in there. So all of their construction timeline, it all started in the fall of 2015 and it should be complete by the fall of 2019. So both of these hospitals really have a regional draw, nationwide also. So it will just improve access for everybody.
And that's a lot of expansion and a lot you just reported on.
Yes, sorry, a lot of talking.
Thanks a lot, Dawn. Okay, back over to Jessica. Latest on the monuments.
The latest on the monuments is essentially Mayor Landrieu sort of, granting the process to his successor. What we know is that there have been two nonprofits that have signed on to manage a public input process into what will finally go at Lee Circle. And I imagine that will include what the name of Lee Circle will be now that Robert E. Lee is no longer there. As for the other monuments, there is right now a American flag at the former site of the Jeff Davis Monument, Jefferson Davis Parkway. The site of the former monument to the White League will sit empty. And there is still a separate process that might be put into place later on for the Beauregard statue, the former site of the Beauregard statue in front of City Park. But Mayor Landrieu has said that he's going to let LaToya Cantrell guide that process and decide what it's going to look like. But for the Lee Circle Monument, there will be the Foundation for Louisiana and a separate firm called Colloquiate Design that's going to collect public input on what people would like to see at that space.
Jessica, what do we know about this Foundation for Louisiana? I remember during the time the monuments were going down, I think a lot of the money went through them.
In an effort to try to protect some of the contractors that signed on, and we saw early on, there were death threats allegedly that went to one contractor who agreed to do the work. It was a long process before they could even get the monuments to come down. Contractors who walked away from the process because they didn't want to be involved. The whole process was really very emotional for a lot of people, and it took a really long time to even get to the point that we're at now.
So the statues themselves, they remain in storage.
They remain in storage, and that is a decision that, again, will fall to Mary-Lette Cantrell to decide what will ultimately happen to them. Really, all this is setting up a public process for getting input so that people can, the mayor-elect can know what the people want before she makes a decision on what would go with that Lee Circle statue.
Okay, and that pedestal is going to stay right now. That
As
is
far as
remaining
I know.
as far as we know.
As far as I know.
And then where Beauregard statue was, is that pedestal going to come down?
I believe there's an American flag that's been placed where the former Beauregard statue was, but the pedestal that surrounds it, I believe, is still there.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see what moves along in the future. Thanks a lot, Jessica. Okay, Tyler, this is something that you're working on right now, and it's something that's going to be moving through the legislature, obviously, in the regular session. And it's an expansion of gambling, much more than what was originally agreed to back in, 1991, when the state approved gambling?
The older viewers will remember that the riverboats...
Like me, yeah, I remember that.
Me too. The riverboats and video poker was legalized in 1991, actually under Buddy Roemer. People have forgotten that. And then the land casino, the Harris Casino in 1992. And what we're going to see with the legislative session that begins on Monday is the biggest effort to expand gambling beyond that, really since back then. And each form of gambling is seeking something.
So, explain to us, what forms of gambling and what are they seeking?
Yeah, so Harris is seeking an extension of its monopoly operating contract that it has with the state. They want another 30 years to go to 2054. They also want to put on another hotel on the site and restaurants. They're not seeking an expansion of the gambling space. The riverboat casinos, which are required to be on water, they now want to move a bit off water, and they also want to be able to put in more machines.
How do they move off water? Explain that. I mean, because that was really a big point back then in the 90s. The riverboats had to actually be a riverboat and sail on the water, and then more and more they were moored, and then they didn't sail. So what do they want to do in terms of encroaching more on the land? They
want to be able to move off the water. For example, they're required to have paddle wheels right now because of the original law, even though they're not going to sail at all. But they want to be able to move a bit off the land on these designated waterways where they are. They can't just go anywhere. And the state officials are hoping that this is, if they're going to be on land and not actually over the water, then they can do a much bigger expansion of what they have.
I think the theory was, to those who oppose gambling, is that it was more assuring for them to be on water That way, if you didn't like them, they could leave, right? Okay, you get a barge to tow them away. Once you can make a commitment to go on land, then you're making another statement about gambling in your community.
Being more permanent in the community.
Remember that the Harris Casino at the time was the only allowable land-based casino other than the Indian casinos, which are under a different law, right?
Yeah, they're under federal law.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so video poker, they want looser regulations and more machines. There are slot machines at 4 racetracks, including the fairgrounds. They want a big expansion in the kinds of machines that they can have at those racetracks. There's going to be an effort to allow fantasy sports betting in the state, and also sports betting as well.
So back in 1991, when this whole gambling thing was really, causing a furor, there was a lot of opposition by the religious community to it. Are we seeing the same type of opposition, or level of opposition?
No, that has dissipated, and in fact, a lot of the opposition to gambling is weaker than before. What's happened is gambling now represents the 4th biggest source to the state of revenue, and if you're a conservative, a lot of conservatives now are supporting an expansion of gambling, or simply the gambling, because that is tax revenue that the states get. They don't have to raise taxes on their voters.
Yeah, one concern was that organized crime would move in and take over, and that hasn't happened. I mean, organized crime is not what it used to be. There was also a concern about gambling addiction. I don't know if that's happened or not.
The gambling addiction is definitely a problem. It doesn't get talked about very much, certainly by the supporters of gambling. And also you have cannibalization. A lot of the money that's spent at the casinos by locals is money they would have spent elsewhere, going out at night or doing whatever. Also, the gambling supporters don't like to talk about that.
So this is legislation or proposed legislation that we'll be seeing in these coming months?
Dozens of bills.
Dozens of bills.
I'll be in Baton Rouge covering it every week. There'll be bills before these different committees sought by one industry or another.
But Harris wants to have a second hotel, and one advantage to having a hotel is that you can bring in high rollers. So if they're bringing high rollers into the community, that's a good thing.
As long as those people then go out into the community and spend their money.
what they earn.
Yep.
All righty, Tyler, we'll be looking for future reports. Looking ahead now, Errol.
Okay, well, ever since Whitney and Hancock merged, locally it's been known as Whitney, and elsewhere else has been known as Hancock. Now that they're getting away with that, they're going to start calling it Hancock-Whitney every place. But where we're going to see it the most is with the leasing of One Shell Square, that within sometime this year they're going to change the name of the building to the Hancock-Whitney building.
Okay, Tyler?
Yeah, so I'll be in Baton Rouge on Monday. The governor is convening, will give us his annual speech. Actually, he does it more than once because they keep having these special sessions. So the special session is supposed to end on June 4th, but it looks like they're going to try to abbreviate it because they have to go back into a special session to solve the problem they didn't fix in the special session that just concluded.
Okay, I guess we have
You
it
got
straight.
that?
Yeah, we have it straight. Thanks, Tyler. Don.
Just a little PSA, not to forget to set your clocks ahead 1 hour on Saturday night so that Monday morning will be dark and early because you'll lose an hour of sleep this
That's right.
weekend as we go into daylight savings time.
Thanks for reminding us, I guess. Jessica?
Mayor-elect LaToya Cantrell has announced that she is officially accepting resumes for CAO, for Chief Financial Officer, for Department of Homeland Security Director, and pretty much every other unclassified major city position that she has to fill before May 7th.
Okay, all right, guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening. See you.
Helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.